that are registered. When St. Louis sent me 34 plus 70, 51. Yeah. We've registered 51 projects. Unfortunately, some of them just got registered recently. The last one, I think the total megawatt was close to 7 megawatt. I can give you the figure. I don't have it with me. I don't know off the top of the head, just of the megawatts that we've registered already. No, I think what he's trying to say, like, in terms of capacity, what is it that we've licensed? We've licensed all those projects that goes to the bid window, some of the cogen, some of the IPPs like Sasol that were there before the bid window. Again, in terms of the total of all the licensed facilities, and even those ones that got a deviation from the minister before the blanket deviation, I don't remember the megawatt allocation. It should be huge. Okay. I can also provide to you later if you need me. I'll talk to my colleagues as well to quickly do, the calculation, and we can provide it to you. The one for licensing, it might take some bit of time if you want to, because like what you're trying to say is like, how much is there? We know in terms of ESCOM. But remember, ESCOM as well is putting some of the plants into cold reserve and things like that and all that. So we might have to sit down and do the calculation and try to see how much of licensed installed capacity do we have in the country. We need to update it even ourselves. Backlog in terms of registration. The answer is simple. We received. Last time we received 17 applications, 16 for PV, 1 cogen. That has been processed. Currently, we are receiving applications. We are liaising with the applicants. Most of the people, however, I'll say this thing, we receive a lot of inquiries. Initially, there was a lot of inquiries relating to registration. Now we receive lots of inquiries relating to both registration and licensing. The next one is coming from the attorney. Is the limit in terms of number of generation facilities. I'll give you an example because I want to try to make it practical. If you have a farm in Limpopo, you have a farm in Free State, you have a farm in the Northern Cape, okay, and you want to put up own use, okay, then you're more than welcome to do that. You'll end up having 3 generators, one in Limpopo, one in the Free State, and the other one in the Northern Cape. Okay. And then
the primary aim is that the notice doesn't put emphasis on the owner or the applicant. It places emphasis on the installed capacity of the facility. So if it's about, if we have 20 facilities that can be separated, they will be registered as each facility. So there's no limit to how many you can apply.
On one property, for example. On one property. Like on one section of one property.
That will be circumventing the provisions of the notice, which we wouldn't agree, because there's a part that deals with in the property, the site. So it becomes the property, the site becomes the property. Then you can't have 20 facilities in one property and count them as 1, 2, I'm applying for 20. We'll rate them as 1.
The next question, if I understand it very well, is like, the 120 days. Oh, I see. Okay. What happens if Nersa doesn't license in 120 days? We are bound by law to process your license application once we receive it. However, in reality, what tends to happen is that applicants send us an application, we request for additional information, and then the information is not submitted to Nersa. What do we normally do? We pack the application. However, if 12 months passes, okay, we're still sitting with the application, what tends to happen? The figures that were there in terms of the cost and some of the assumptions that were there. If it's a PV, some of the panels, whatever, are imported from outside. Okay, exchange rates and things like that. Some of the figures becomes outdated. So we can't use the same figures. So what do we normally do? When you come back to us after a year has elapsed, we kindly request you to resubmit an application with the new information and new financial or new factors that are applicable at that point. Brings life easier for ourselves. We don't want to go back to your application that you submitted a year ago and try to actually factor in CPI and try to move your cost of capital for, we don't know, you have to go there and do the calculation yourself as an applicant. And we use the figures coming from you, because later on if we do the calculation and we try to escalate it, we use what we thought is the correct exchange rate and things like that. You might turn around and say, no, those are not my figures. So we can't do it for you. So normally the period is 12 months. Once 12 months elapses, we'll request you to submit. Sometimes even before the 12 months elapses, sometimes economic things change. We may actually not necessarily request you to submit the application. We may request you to submit updated information. But currently, if it's over a year, we request you to resubmit the application. Yeah.
The probably to talk to the other part of the question in terms of what happens if the application is resident with the regulator and we don't complete it in 120 days. Typically what we'll do, like any other administrative process, is to notify the applicant that for whatever the reasons are, be it technical, be it administrative or legal, the finalization of the application is delayed, so that we request your indulgence on it, that we will finalize it. We wouldn't just keep quiet and not do anything and not even notify you, because the risk is having somebody making reference to pattern and say failure to take a decision within the statutory timeline. Therefore, yeah, that becomes a decision. Then we are taken in for review when we have it. Or some others that we have experienced is to go for a mandamus application to compel us to make a decision. That within the timelines that we have, we need to make a decision. So we try to communicate back to the applicant. The last part is whether there's an opportunity to appeal. Unfortunate enough, when it comes to regulatory matters, the law is very clear that if you are not satisfied with the decision of the regulator, and decision in this respect is both the positive or the negative, you have to take it through a judicial review. But if you are not settled with the decision of the energy regulator sitting as a tribunal, where you administer a penalty, that you can appeal it. So there is that separation between a regulatory decision from an administrative or punitive decision that the regulator can take. So when you come to issues of licensing or registration, when the regulator makes decision and you are unhappy, the only platform available is to take it for review, not an appeal.
Can we take another 5 set of questions? Start here. 2, 3. Let's see. Let's say 4 there, and 5. Okay. Now.
Good afternoon. It's Chris Gilland again, Publishers. I want to just ask you 2 questions, please. Firstly, regarding this 500 megawatt allocation per annum. In the IRP 2010, there is no allocation and there's a blanket deviation given. Does the Minister make any mention of a 500 megawatt limit for the deviation per annum in terms of IRP 2010? Because there is no limit. There is no, in fact, the limit is 0 in IRP 2010, but there's a blanket deviation. So is there a 500 megawatt limit per annum until the new IRP comes in? And when the new IRP comes in the draft IRP, to my knowledge, there is no limit given for the first 3 years. And the limit of 500 megawatts only applies thereafter. If I'm wrong, please correct me. But I seem to remember that there is no limit. There is just an allocation for embedded generation, but without a limit. So why is there being a limit of 500 megawatt being talked about, at least for the first 3 years of the draft IRP and for the current situation of the IRP 2010? Second question, if I may. I have noticed that you took great care to only accept a 200 Rand registration fee after you've checked completeness and adequacy, etc., and really I appreciate that, because nobody wants to pay money for nothing. But if we turn to the applicant approaching the licensed distributor, the situation is completely different, certainly in terms of Eskom, where the applicant is required to submit, in my case, for a 20 kilowatt rooftop PV system for our business. We're required to submit upfront a 3,800 Rand non-refundable quotation fee. Now I've asked Eskom, what are they actually quoting us for? And they refuse to tell me. And I also asked them, in terms of this quotation, which you won't tell me what it's for, what is the price likely to be that you are quoting me for? And they refuse to tell me either. And so it makes it impossible for me to know whether my project is viable or not, because I have no idea what they are wanting to quote me. In other words, they want money from me, even if this comes to nothing. And this is your licensee that is doing that to me. And I would like to ask Nersa for its protection against its licensee. And remember, I have no option but to deal with this licensee of yours, because they are a monopoly. And they could charge me anything they liked. And it might actually ruin the viability of my project. And I don't know what they're going to quote me, not even roughly. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you. My name is Mark Skoji from City Energy. We are involved in the gas to power generation, and we do dirty gas, what used to be waste gas, flue gas and biogas, as well as natural gas. My question is, in the past, waste gas was exempt from licensing up to 10 megawatts. Is that still the case? Where waste gas and biogas are exempt from licensing requirements, we had to just register those plants. I am aware that the natural gas plant needs to be licensed. That's my first question. The second question is, am I allowed, excuse me, we're involved in a number of projects. Am I allowed to apply at the same time for 3 or 4 projects at different locations for natural gas projects? Am I allowed to apply simultaneously for 4 projects of 10 megawatts each? at different sites. And the next question, I didn't get clarity on the attorney's answer. Does if I have 10 or 6 or 10 gensets of 1.5 or 1 megawatt at one location, does that count as one plant, or must I register each genset separately? Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name is Jacob Iman. I represent large industrial gas users in South Africa. Just a comment. I think my learned colleague there, Chris Yelland, in terms of the capacity, what the draft. I'm also involved in the NetLab process as a matter of interest. So what the draft or the emerging, let's call it IRP, is telling us, following the public comments of last year, is that for the first 4 years, starting in 2019, and I'm just looking at a document here, that the allocation, and it refers to this 500 megawatts, allocation to the extent of the short-term capacity and energy gap. So, although we're talking about 500 megawatts, it seems like there's, in the first 4 years, the intent, at least of the DOE, is to allocate these projects. It's called now distributed generation, not embedded generation anymore, to the extent that there's a short-term capacity and energy gap. So just want to clarify that, or if you could, I would appreciate that. The other question that I have is, if this 500 megawatt cap is there, what is the allocation mechanism that Nersa is going to use in order to allocate applications? And I'm talking about valid applications. So if you get swamped by the first week in January, which is the first I assume it's calendar years, with 600 megawatts worth of licenses, on what basis will you allocate anyone that falls off and over beyond that 500 megawatt? Does it mean that those applicants need to then wait until the new year, resubmit new applications, or do those backlogs simply roll over into the new calendar year? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Email from our engineering services. First question, is there any new regulations in the pipeline that you can maybe inform us of regarding small-scale embedded generation with regards to, for example, standardization of tariffs across municipalities? I've heard something about PV or LV banking at this stage that's in the pipeline. This plant, it's all a generator, even if it's a battery system. Is there going to be, is there plans to differentiate between these in the near future? And finally, from my understanding of the fact that we're talking about the notification that was published in 2017, being a notification and not a regulation.
Can I have the last question for this round? Yes.
Solar only or wind, or you're not really concerned about?
One of the questions, but I'll tell you when I come then. Okay, the art doesn't have any allocation whatsoever. It's got different technologies and different allocation for different technologies. Okay. So what the minister has done, okay, is that the minister has come up. Remember, as Nersa, we don't come up with thresholds. We don't decide, like, have 1 megawatt to 10 megawatt should be licensed, right? That's not our call. That's the Department of Energy. So our understanding, and I say our understanding as Nersa, okay, is that the minister has made a decision to say that in the RP now, because that's the one that's valid and legally valid. The other one is a draft, it's not. It doesn't have a legal standing. In the current RP, please, here's an allocation from 1 megawatt to 10 megawatt. License them. Now I'm giving a blanket exception. Our understanding is that it's 500 megawatt. Okay. And I want to respond to the question regarding the colleague who said that you also see at network, because I think they are linked. Okay. And the other question that you came up with is that according to your your understanding is that, there's no limit for allocation for embedded generation or distributed generation in the draft RP. And that's the RP that's sitting in network. I'll combine this question with the other question where it was said that, for the first 4 years, it talks about the fact that, the limit will be looked at to the extent of the capacity in the energy gap. Okay. What is the gap out there? Okay. I must repeat one thing. That's our understanding as NES. My colleagues say, okay, but the limit is 500 megawatt. But if you look at it ideally, okay, the limit should have been at least, I'm saying at least 1,000, because if ESCOM institute stage 1 load shedding, translate about 1,000 megawatt. Because that will talk into the extent of the capacity in energy. Okay. Now, the document that we are sitting with, it could be an outdated document, I don't know. Okay, because you're talking about the first 3 years, he's talking about the first 4 years, and
could be. I just said I'm not sure exactly, but
so what we'll do, we don't want to look at Department of Energy, okay, and really say that accordingly. The issue of Mr. Elan, between you and ESCOM, also requested protection. Let me make it simple. We can't sit here and debate and try to say that 3,800 to do well. That they're charging you, which is one sort of the best thing you can do, lodge a dispute with NEF. I'll deal with it. I'll deal with it. Licenses complaint. It's a dispute resolution. So I'll see you quickly start very question. And then I'll talk to you, and then I'll talk to ESCOM and deal with this matter and try to say that what's the issue. And we have to understand from ESCOM as well why are they charging that amount of money. So it will be dealt with as part of the dispute resolution mechanism. It doesn't only apply to you, it applies to anyone else or any generator. If for some reason, for instance, the distributor or the electricity provider can't give you, remember the distributor can refuse connection, but they must refuse with reasons. Like for example, that's a dispute. You declare it witness. The dispute is declared in writing. Maybe my colleagues are here, the dispute resolution officer. So we'll actually normalize this now. It's a dispute resolution, and my colleague will always be there. It's a dispute. Gas to power projects, and I must say, I'm not so sure about this 10 megawatt exemption. To be honest, RP 2010 doesn't have any exemption whatsoever. Whether it's waste to energy project, I know of waste to energy projects that the minister granted approval to delete from RP 2010. So there's no exemption for waste to energy projects. It's just like any other generator. I'm responding to this to one of the questions to say that, basically my understanding of the question is that what type of technology that's being used in these speeds, registration or license, any technology. There is no specification to say what type of technology is going to be used. Biomass, landfill gas, waste to energy, gas, whatever, any technology. Even for whatever generation up to 1 megawatt. I'll try to clarify this one about 4 projects in the same place. The notice talks about same property. You can't have in the same property more than one team generator. Then you're not complying with the notice.
It's one plant, it's not
one property.
It's one plant, one property is one plant for a shopping mall. It's one plant, 10 megawatt plant in one shopping mall.
10
megawatts in one shopping mall, yes.
If it's 10 megawatt plant in one particular shopping mall, that doesn't have to be registered, it has to be licensed. That's a good question. You see, they try to analyze it so we can understand. If in the same property, it doesn't matter. The installed capacity in the same property, the installed capacity is 1 megawatt. It has to be registered. If the installed capacity in the same property, the more whatever, or far whatever, if the installed capacity exceeds 1 megawatt, up to 10 megawatt, it has to be registered. But these are 10 megawatt. Getting an approval from the minister to deviate from that. So 0 to 1 same property, 1 megawatt. Above 1 to 10. That's one of the situations that I want to say. And I think I've responded even to the one, but that's because I'm from Mark.
Multiple applications. Can we apply one for a number of projects?
Oh, I see what you're trying to say. Okay, what you're trying to say is that if you have a mall, and there could be different suppliers to that particular mall.
So if I have 3 moves, can I apply for one move here, one move here, one move at the same time?
The answer is yes, you can apply because the notice makes a reference to property. So you actually have 3 properties. And the limiter therefore is the 1 megawatt for each property. So you can submit 3 applications because the properties are different. But as Dennis is highlighting, that will only be for registration. This issue of property relates to the registration. Licensing is open-ended. It's not limited. You should not interpret, you should not take the notice and read it into the 1 to 10 megawatt. It's not applicable. The framework applicable to 1 to 10 megawatt is licensing. And licensing is, as Dennis has highlighted, to say it has a process of its own, which the only distinction between 1 to 10 megawatt and above 10 megawatt is where the deviation approval is given. The other one is given already. Then one above 10 megawatts is not given. So you have to go back to the minister. That's what the distinctions are in terms of licensing. But the remainder of the process is the same.
The next question relates to my colleague, I didn't get his name, the one who said this is it, and I'd like to say.
So I'm Jacob, you want
Jacob, thanks. And it's like, what allocation mechanism is going to be used, to be honest. We received a letter, for the 2nd of May. Okay. We have to come up with the criteria. You know what, if there's no criteria, we'll have a problem. Okay. I mean, I can mention all the criteria right now that already is going to be there. That's one of them. Okay. For those parts that are already ready for licensing, that have already got the permits and everything in place. So we have obviously those ones. I gave an example before. I received lots of applications, and those applications that one application might have all the information that would have the other one in all them. So those applications or those projects are ready. Obviously, those ones have to license first, and those ones are not yet ready. For instance, if the project that doesn't have an environmental authorization, I can't treat this agent than the one that's got an environmental authorization. However, we just received this recently. We have to come up with a criteria. The issue of saying that, what do we do is a question that we're asking ourselves. That if you apply, and I'm assuming that the 500 megawatt limit applies, so members have to engage the Department of Energy. If, for instance, we find that, we've got 750 in one particular year, we have to look at it to say that we might license all of them in that particular year, but says, no, this one's 500, this particular, the other one is a following year. Depending on your commercial operation date as well. Remember, for electricity, we license the operation of the facility. So one of the criteria as well is the commercial operation date of the plant as well. It will play a role. So we have to come up with a criteria, I agree. Okay, and we just got this letter recently. Okay, we're still looking at it as well, legally and otherwise, to say how do we best implement it. And that registration. we've got a procedure for licensing, but the criteria is when we have to come up with a mechanism to deal with that. The other one was the issue of, standardization of tariffs. Okay, and then I think this one relates to bilaterals, I suppose. And let's see if I'm missing the point. If the generator is going to be selling to a customer, if it's going to be selling to a customer, the issue of tariff, as far as I'm concerned, is a bilateral between the generator and the customer. You must agree on a tariff. You have to. Okay. We'll look at the tariff when we are analyzing the application. So that should be in the power purchase agreement. The issue of standardization of tariffs, to be honest, South Africa, we're sitting in a situation where, especially with the distributors, the tariffs are different for different areas and different municipalities. But that doesn't apply, let's be honest. Even if it's licensing, if it's a bilateral is a negotiation between two parties. It should be a price that you come up with. All we have to do as Nersa is that price, are you able to recover your cost and have a reasonable return in your investment? That's what we do. And the last question, I've answered it. Be it registration, be it licensing, the notice doesn't talk about technology to use. There's no mention anywhere in the notice about technology, be it gas, waste to energy. Again, the letter for division in terms of 10.2G of the Television Act, it doesn't talk about technology. Any technology is welcome. As long as, the application qualifies for licensing, we'll license it. Yeah, okay. Just take it you want to. Can the minister amend the notice that repeals the current notice? The way they are making right now, yes, that's the answer. But I don't want to talk about the draft notice. I mentioned that it's out for public consulting process. We don't want to influence. So we're not going to talk about that notice. And the reason why I emphasize this point, as Nersa, we implement policy. We implement a document that is called a legal statement. The one that's out for public participation process, as far as we're concerned, is work in progress. We can't implement it. So I don't want us to dwell on something else that we can do nothing about it as Nersa. I'm here to actually share with you those documents that got legal standing that we can implement as Nersa.
Thank you. Let's take the last round of questions. I think the time now it's almost 1 o'clock. So these questions that we are going to come up with, they're standing between, us and lunch. So if we can just be, brief with your questions. I see colleagues are asking 5 questions. And, maybe let's just limit to at least 3. At least 3, and let us just be brief. I see a hand there. Yes, you'll be the first, and then second. 3. 4. Going. 4. Going. Gone. Sure. Just that.
My name is Terence Mpofu from Tswina Solutions. We have, relating to property, we have a farm which is subdivided into plots, different households. The intention now of different households in the same property, they would like to generate using PV solar system. Are we going to be treated as one property, or each individual plot will produce its own 10 megawatts? That's my question.
Bokwe Tanzero from Guinea. My question is, why requirements to comply with the grid? Or is each grid code for renewable power plant? Just clarity for that. Just clarity. And the second one is, how long will Conquer to take 1 to 10 megawatts data from the minister takes?
The question, can I go ahead? Sorry, can you just repeat the question? The last one.
How long will Conquer to the 1 megawatt to 10 megawatt data from the minister takes? It takes.
How long will it take?
Yeah, it will take how long?
To get a letter. To concur.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, it's fine. Let's go to the next question.
I think was it me? My name is Mark Borges from Sustainable Energy Africa. Firstly, a point of clarity. Are we saying with small-scale embedded generation that installation cannot proceed until Nersa has gone through the registration application process, the additional 3 months or so of process? And then secondly, we work with municipalities around small-scale embedded generation, and there must be 30 or 40 out there that have fairly thorough application processing procedures. Part of those procedures, and they're endorsed by SALVA and they're endorsed by AMU, part of those procedures are checking compliance with Schedule 2. So to me, there's a duplicate happening here. And I'm wondering if there isn't a way for Nersa, rather than having a completely separate process around this, to rather be okay with the way the municipalities do this checking. If we're talking about efficiency of processes, to me, that might be a suitable way forward, and I wonder if you can comment on that.
Next one.
Thank you, Chris Yellen again. This very welcome workshop on the registration and licensing process, I think is very, very welcome. But my question is, we're discussing a Schedule 2 that is 18 months, 19 months, 20 months old. And we're about to replace this Schedule 2 with a new Schedule 2, which you don't want to talk about today. And it seems to me, why wait to have a workshop for 18 months to 2 years and then have the workshop on the very eve of its withdrawal and replacement with a new, and we're not even talking about the new one. We should be talking about the new one today, part of the public process. The public process is still open, and I would have thought you would welcome a discussion about this new Schedule 2 and not close the door, because that is really what we would like to talk about, is what are we going to be subjected to. Thank you.
Okay. I'll start with the first one, where I think Terence spoke about a farm divided into a plot. The trick here is the install capacity of the generation facility. If you are going to put up one generation facility to supply the different household, if the install capacity is up to 1 megawatt, it has to be registered. If the install capacity is about 1 megawatt to 10 megawatt, it has to be licensed. Now, in terms of the different household and all that, depending if the household is subdivided, it's sectional title, and I think we'll talk more about that. Then if it's sectional title is another legal matter that we have to look at it as a property, that particular sectional title.
Okay. I think we wouldn't want to invent this definition. The notice has actually defined what a property is. That is either a farm agricultural holding, or sectional title unit. A building located on that farm agricultural holding and So the definition is there in the notice to explain that sectional title, we need to appreciate that the rights of the owners are cumulative. So it becomes a property. There's no individual rights to say this is my property alone. I'm not bound by the rules that are there for the sectional title. When you get to a farm, when you have a farm that is not subdivided, the ownership of the farm is just one farm. But if the farm is divided into portions, there's different ownership of that farm. So they all each become a property on their own. So when we deal with this issue of the definition, we need to recognize the latter part of it. What constitutes a property in terms of the law, not only limited to what the notice says. So we need to recognize that when you have an agricultural holding, where you can't have a farmhouse and then you have the servant quarters on the side and say it's different properties. It's just one farm. So we need to be aligning it with other laws where if the municipality has approved, the MLA has approved the proclamation and the rezoning of the property, those properties are separate, each become a property.
The next question. Coming from Mr. Bokwe regarding PV, sometimes they inject harmonics into the network. Okay. And then at the same time, the network service provider to distributor don't want you to go and put up an unsafe facility that will harm that grid. So that grid code is meant to make sure that everybody complies with it. It's a code of practice for all the players. The next one is a big one. Any concurrence with a letter from the minister? There's no concurrence. That letter was issued in terms of 10.2G of the resolution. It's an approval to deviate from the integrated resource plan. There's no concurrence that is done by Nersa. We just have to implement it. Mark installation can go ahead. My understanding was that talking about Salka and Amiu, and then the fact that it's like the whole process is a delaying process. Unfortunately, we live in South Africa. There are laws in South Africa. Okay. The current law will stipulate that the network service provider or distributor cannot register a generation facility, simple as that. The current law stipulates that a distributor generator can issue a license to a generator. The only entity that has got the right to register or license is the Energy Regulator of South Africa. Now, having said that, okay, the network service provider has got this responsibility. I talked about the first phase of approval. They are more than welcome as a distributor to do that. Unfortunately, within the laws of South Africa, the second part is our approval for you to register. So the answer is simple. You shouldn't be able to operate a facility up until when it's registered.
You say you should?
You shouldn't. Yeah, you have to wait for the registration. And I'm not talking about those facilities, the continued operation that will be there before the notice. The next question regarding Schedule 2, I think what was thinking. Regarding Schedule, okay, it's one coming from Chris Yelland. Okay, I'll first take it and then I think Mbonise will add. Okay, it's a good question. And then you're also raising a very important thing, but at the same time, you're also sitting with the problem that's nice. Okay, first, as a person who had to deal with registration and licensing, I picked up that people have got a tendency to think that the notice that's out there for that's the draft that's called for public transport, that's the one that's applicable. Okay. I received a lot of queries regarding registration relating to the draft notice. And I repeat again, we did not discuss, and if you remember the triangle very well, the notice is not our document. It might be a draft now, we are just concurring. It's the Department of Energy. The final say in terms of gazetting of that notice is the Department of Energy. Now, Nersa, in terms of implementation, it will only come after the Department of Energy has issued a notice. The other question to say that, I know today is the closing date, if I'm not mistaken, for drafting of, for submission of comments on the draft notice. One of the main reasons why we're having this workshop is to tell the public out there, please wait for the draft notice to be finalized. Don't confuse it with a notice that's already custody. That's one of the reasons why we're here. Because there's a confusion out there. People tend to think the notice that's valid is the one that was issued on the 10th of November 2017. Now, we'll receive comments, we'll go through our processes, we'll go to Department of Trade. It's a process that has to be followed. It's still work in progress. And from where we sit as Nersa, we're not in a position to implement that particular notice. So it's a good question. And I'm seeing the problem when people are confusing the whole thing. Okay. Now, regarding licensing above 1 megawatt to 10 megawatt, I'm also sitting with a problem when people like asking me that Dennis, why he says if Nersa is restricting the 10 megawatt. Now, I want to explain to you. As Nersa, we're not in a position to put thresholds. The Department of Energy, through the Minister of Energy, can put thresholds, in this case for allocation. The installed capacity of 1 megawatt for registration was not set by Nersa, it was set by the Department of Energy. The allocation above 1 megawatt to 10 megawatt was not set by Nersa, it was set by the Department of Energy. Our understanding of 500 megawatt is that must reference it to the allocation of distributed generation. That's in the RP, which is sitting at network. If for some reason we misinterpreted it, we'll have to engage the colleagues at the Department of Energy. Now, what I'm trying to say is that Nersa will implement policy. We don't come up with policy. We don't change anything. Our position is to implement nothing else. So the main reason, Chris, and the people that are here, was to try by all means to clarify the point that, what is it that as Nersa we can do? Nersa today, we can register facilities up to 1 megawatt based on the notice that was issued on 10th November 2017. That's what we can do. Number 2, we can license facilities above 1 megawatt up to 10 megawatt based on the letter that we received from the Minister of Energy that was issued in terms of 10-2G. Anything outside that, we can do nothing. I hope I've responded to this.
Maybe just to again give the context of how the two processes they kind of relate. The notice in terms of the law of the Electricity Regulation Act, it's a two-format document. The first part of it is the amendment of the schedule. The second part of it deals with registration. When the minister published the draft amendment in June 2018 to amend the current notice, the requirement of the law is that the minister must do that for registration in consultation with Nersa. The minister published the document and got comments. Then it was given to Nersa to say, I need your concurrence on the document. The law is very clear in terms of how do you concur. There's a judgment against Nersa regarding the Earth Life to say, when you concur, you need to follow your own process. That is the process that we are undertaking to go out for public comments. When we complete that, we're going to take the final document from Nersa and take it back to the department, to the minister. As to when the minister will finalize that process, we don't know. it's a ministerial process. So that is where the distinction between the notice that we are currently using, that we are having a workshop on, and the draft notice, that the draft notice doesn't have any status in law, except that it's been taken through public consultation process.
Thank you. Thank you. I think that brings us to the end of this workshop. And thanks a lot for attending this workshop. We know that it was at a short notice, but you managed to, make it to this workshop. I understand there is lunch at Oasis Restaurant, so please join us for lunch. And there's a attendance register that is circulating. If you have not yet signed it, please just touch base with my colleague Moni at the door there for you to complete the attendance register. Thank you once again. And the parking vouchers, if ever you don't have one, please just contact all the colleagues. Thank you.